Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us here on Poultry Keepers 360 Live. We have Jeff here. I'm here. Kerry's off celebrating. Today's his birthday, and we have a special guest. Jessica Watson is here, and she's going to be talking to us about her Shamos, and these are magnificent birds. So, coming up in just a few seconds, we're going to dive into it. Hang on. There, I hope you enjoyed that little 7-second musical interlude.
That was nice. I look forward to it on the podcast too. It gives me a little burst of joy. I know what's coming. Chicken talk.
Well, Jessica, first question, and I get asked this a good bit: is it Shamo or Shamo?
Oh man, when I was at the National, I didn't even know there were so many ways people could say this. It's a very simple word, but as far as I understand, it is Shamo.
Hot dog! I told them right.
Yep. And then I found out that people say Malay and Malay, and I was like, oh man, you can just pronounce real simple short words all kinds of ways.
Absolutely. Well,
I say Shamo.
you guys ready to get started? We're gonna have
I
fun
am.
tonight. By the way, we're gonna have fun. Um, let's start. Well, we've got some slides here, but let's talk about where Shamos are from.
Where
Take it away.
Shamos are from. So this is interesting. This is not knowledge that is my own research, but other people have put in the time to figure this out. And Japan specifically, they did a gene mapping project and found two main populations of Shamos that exist in Japan and originally came there through these different trade routes from Thailand. And the Shamos that came there from Thailand didn't look like our modern Shamos, but the Japanese really expert level breeders of all of their livestock and selected for this real upright bird. And then you have the Shamo we see today, which has been around for centuries, which is pretty cool.
They are indeed, and until you have seen one in person, folks, you really can't appreciate. They are just magnificent, impressive. I don't have enough adjectives to really describe them all.
They are very impressive, and when I here I'm going to move on and let you know how I got into this breed.
Go for it.
It's a good lead in because I was interested in the breed and then went to seek it out and acquired what I thought was my first Shamos, knowing very little. And I thought what I had was magnificent. And then as I dove further into researching this bird, I fairly quickly realized that that's not what I had at all. And that Shamos were actually much bigger bird, much more magnificent bird than what I had, which was probably some Aseel mixed, long-legged, upright. I thought, yep, this is it. I've really done something. I found the Shamo. I had not.
Jessica, you were talking about how large they are.
Yeah.
It's one of those few birds that a person could kneel down and almost be looking eye to eye with the bird.
Oh, for sure. Yes. And, I'm not very tall. I'm 5'4". And because they are, what's the word? They're excitable birds. You have to be cautious around them. So when I handle them, I do have to be careful because if I carry this 10-pound, 13-pound bird on my hip, he's at eye level with me, which is not a great place for them to be, for any bird to be,
Yes.
is right at eye level. So yeah, once I really realized, and then I was like, wow, I'm going to level up another 50%. And this is an even bigger bird. But I'm almost glad that was my introduction because, I had the time to mentally prepare that they only get bigger from there.
They really do.
Yeah.
It's Yeah.
So what'd you do with your original ASILs? You
So
still have
yeah,
them?
the
Or?
original birds,
Yeah.
I decided to track down a legitimate Shamo breeder, and he's a couple generations into Oriental game fowl, so he was able to look at the pictures I sent him of my birds in a very kind way, tell me why they were not Shamos at all. And then, show me comparisons of his birds. And I kept these birds for a while just as pets because they're really interesting. And then just sort of pass them along. Some people just sort of collect birds to collect birds, and so I passed them along to somebody who had the space and energy to keep them, and then got my first Shamo hatching eggs. Was actually how I started.
I
Yeah,
would not have thought that, but
I know. And, it's just really difficult to get a hold of these birds. And when you want something and you want it now, sometimes that's the way you have to go. And I knew that I was getting them from a reliable breeder who'd been working with this breed for a long time. But admittedly, I am still, you still have to pull out a lot of defects when you start with hatching eggs. It's a longer journey.
oh, sure it is. Sure it
So,
is. What are some of the traits of Shamos? The height, we've talked about a little bit. Weight, you've kind of alluded to, but
yes. So that high station, which the high station, when you look at a bird, a high station is going to be the legs are almost directly under the head and neck of that bird. They're towards the front of the body. And then in game fowl, you can have all three. You can have high, medium, or low. And a medium is going to be the legs more balanced in the middle of the body. And then low is going to be the legs a little behind and a lot of body out front. So that's the basic look. But then in
and
the details, they should have really the slope from their head all the way down through the end of their tail. It should look like a nice, even ski slope kind of line. The tail angle should be low, and anything above horizontal is considered a defect and like a disqualification if you're going to show.
yeah.
So
Sue
that's my number
Dobson,
one. Go
Sue
ahead.
Dobson had a question about them. What are they mainly used for? Decorative, meat, or guard dogs?
Guard dogs. Well, they are not. I find that my American game are actually more assertive around the yard as far as chasing things off and stuff like that. They're definitely a beautiful decorative bird, except for having them in your yard is quite complicated. Um, we do utilize our culls for meat. That's new this year. I've not done that before, but I've kind of come to the point where I don't feel comfortable letting birds with defects go to pass on their traits that I find unacceptable. So that's sort of a new level for me.
Well,
You
how do
know,
they taste though? I mean, have you figured out how to prepare them?
Yeah, so it's a
Uh,
lean, obviously a really lean bird, but
mhm.
even in the standard, they do mention their meat qualities. Their body of the bird should be meaty. They're muscular bird. But in like Asian cuisine and stuff, they're often cooked as a whole body bird in broth, and then the meat is picked off and then put into whatever this large soup dish
Okay.
is. So by design, that works out really well because they're such a low fat bird. You wouldn't want to roast them to death.
yeah.
Yeah.
We've got some slides here, and I guess we just been sitting here talking and having a good time. But why don't we
Yeah.
jump into the slides and
Okay. Yeah. Let's do
see
that.
what you sent us? It's some good stuff.
Some colors. This is interesting too. These are not my birds, but it's interesting to note because it's not something that the standard mentions, even though black-breasted red, this pullet hen here on the right is considered black-breasted red. But in the standard, the art makes it look like the bird should be like a black-breasted red you'd see in an Old English game. But that actually is not true to the breed. So all of the Oriental game their colors are built on wheaten. So the black-breasted red in a Shamo is actually a cinnamon wheaten color,
Yeah.
or like a smutty kind of wheaten color. And then this other stag is dark. And the dark variety in Shamo is the same as in the Cornish. And I'm very interested in working with the dark variety. And as far as I can tell, they are perhaps functionally extinct in this country. I see images of them at exhibitions in Europe and in Germany, but I can't find anybody who keeps dark Shamos.
I have seen a lot of Oriental games in Germany. I haven't been there, but just the photos I've seen, I know they tend to like those.
Yes, and there's kind of they say that the European style of Shamo differs from the traditional Japanese style of Shamo, which is probably true, and probably the American variety does too. But we all have our own standards, so that's just how it's going to be.
Each country seems to like to put their own little twist on a breed.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's just a cuckoo variety that's, I don't believe, can be built on wheaten. I could be wrong. Color genetics are not my thing. So I am sure that that color was brought in and then they just bred back and brought them back to the right type. But white is an accepted variety. Also, never seen anybody exhibit a white Shamo at a show. Never seen anybody exhibit a black Shamo at a show. I've never really seen much but wheaten out there.
That's all I have ever encountered.
Yep.
Some of them, the females would be lighter, some of them would be darker. But we got a question here from Susan Hughes. Wants to know: do they have the longer necks to help them reach their long bodies? If not, then why the long necks?
So their original purpose by design was for fighting, for cockfighting. And proportionately, the neck and the body and the legs are all basically in thirds, which if you look at these pictures, you can kind of see that they are even in that way. And they're heavy, like body fighting birds. So they don't get airborne like, say, an American game fowl type of or Old English game would do. So they actually use their necks in combat, and that was what the original purpose of that long neck is for. So they have this high body, big neck, and they can see over their opponents.
Gotcha.
Now it's just for unusual looks, and they can reach every part of their body for convenience.
Okay, let's see.
So Rebecca or Jessica, have you kept one? What's your oldest male? So, I mean, what do they peak out as far as weight? In the standard, what would be the high end expectation?
My oldest male is 4 years old, and he's 13 pounds.
That's
and
probably where he'll stop. He's fully matured.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. The standard, and it's, I think, the same. I know it's the same in Japan. I'm not sure how it is in Europe, but the standard will say a weight, but it's that and up. Like that's supposed to be the minimum weight. So I think our standard says 11 pounds, but that's considered like the minimum.
So the one that you won with was a cockerel when you came to Ohio Nationals last year. So was that a 1-year-old or, I mean?
No, he was only 7 months old. He changed immensely. That was young, but ahead a little bit. But the problem with these birds is they're very difficult to keep in condition after that point. Unless maybe you're just not going to breed the bird and your only goal is to keep the bird in condition, these hard feathered birds are really difficult to maintain.
Oh yeah.
So,
Uh,
it's almost like you just have to have a new season of birds if you want to show them.
Yeah, but I mean, your cockerel at 7 months old, he had to weigh close to 8 pounds, right?
He was big,
When
boy.
you, yeah,
he was.
Yeah, that was a big bird.
yeah, that's so, you're talking 7 months old, and he
So
was,
yeah, so
yeah,
this is
go
kind
ahead.
of an example of the beginnings of what happens, and this is a mystery to me, something I'm really interested in decoding. Um, the feather destruction that seems to happen with Shamos, and I hear from other breeders they have this problem too, down the neck especially, and then where you see in this picture, and it gets bad. It gets really bad. And I've even bought a camera. I have yet to see one of their pen mates, a female bird, doing this to them, and I've yet to see them doing it to themselves. So it truly is a mystery.
I have seen that in other breeds too.
Mm.
Dark Cornish will do that. Large fowl modern games will do that. Not to the extent that Shamo does, but I have seen it before. Yeah.
And what's the
But
reasoning?
so are they doing it to
Don't know.
themselves, or is it another bird doing it, Rip,
Biggest
or is it?
question.
No,
Yeah.
no. I mean, I've seen it in Cornish males who were cooped by themselves
All right.
for a long time.
So
It
this
just
bird had it the worst because he had swelling and just, I mean, the skin follicles, everything just looked awful on this bird. And then when he molted back out, you would think if he was doing it to himself or the females were doing it, the cycle would repeat immediately, but that's not the case. Now he's in excellent feather.
well, kind of like me going bald, I think, to some extent.
So it's interesting.
Hmm.
It's one of those things. It's like, can I select away from this? But I don't know yet.
Yeah.
So is it a feather deficiency? Do you
Right.
feel that it's a feather weakness, or some sort of a deficiency nutritionally? Um, because you use the term hard feathered, I'm just wondering, you know, you and I have been working together to try and dial this in, right? And
Yes.
they've come a long way. I am not a genius at Shamo nutrition. I'm doing the best I can based on the information I can find. So I'm just wondering, we've been talking about in previous shows using the cysteine amino acid, which goes the next step further, because when they analyze a feather, um, cysteine is the highest amino acid found in feathers, right?
Hmm.
So I'm just wondering if that's something that you and I need to talk about, outside the show. But
I
I'm wondering if that's the next level to try and correct this. And
I'm all for it, trying
okay, I mean, I don't
whole
know.
group and seeing if there's a change.
Yeah, I'm learning, and so I don't know. So
Shaggy says he says needing out. I think he means nerding out. That this is awesome. And I agree, Shaggy. Whether you're needing or nerding, I agree with you.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
okay.
glad
We
because
got to
I don't
do
know
that.
many people who can nerd out on Shamo. So if we can all meet in one place, one time, this is
Mm.
great.
I'm going to be in Ohio again this fall, so make sure you stop
Oh,
by and
great.
spend some time. Yep.
Well, I won't be so starstruck this time. Now we have a little bit of rapport.
Yeah, I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. So,
And he's trying to talk me into going too, so I don't know.
yeah,
Yes,
no,
yes, you
Jessica,
should.
you need to help us convince Rip. He needs to be there at the table with me and Carrie. So,
I want to
yeah.
be there. It's will my back let me be there? That's the $64,000
Well,
question.
I come from the Badger State, so I know how to badger somebody and get it
Oh,
done.
Nice,
geez.
nice.
I'm outnumbered before I even get started.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeff. What's in
I
this
mean, the
picture,
only other.
Jessica? Let's get off this.
Oh, okay, let's get on with it. So this is a picture of one of my pens, and it leads into just a couple different things. One is I learned to not overthink the nest box. You can overthink things with these birds because of their unique size. Um, when they're kept in trios, females are ruthless. So you really don't want to create too many areas a bird can get trapped. So I use feed bags like this under this platform. And if they have to, they can run straight out of the feed bags like a dog door. Like there's not a 3-sided trapped area in there that a bird can get stuck in. They really can be harsh with each other. And then I utilize a platform instead of a perch because of our winters. And they don't have feathers on their whole front is bare. So
That makes
that they
sense.
can get down into shavings or chopped straw or something. I use a radiant heater over the top when it gets really sub-zero out, and I have had no issues. Nothing with frostbite. They've just been fine like this.
That's cool.
I mean,
It's simple.
Japan, where they come from, gets cold as well. So
It
you
gets
would
cold.
think, yeah,
Yeah.
you would think, depending on, there's a large area of Japan that experiences temperatures probably not Wisconsin cold, but
Right.
you know they have snow and they have colder weather and things like that. So
Monica says, "Wow, bigger than my white Chinese geese," and I thought the geese were big.
I think geese are so intriguing to me, and that would be such an interesting bird. But then I picture a Shamo meeting a goose and don't know if I want to do that.
That could not
no,
be a fun thing.
That could not
let's
be a
not do
fun
that.
thing. An eye level friend or enemy. So yeah, this is a setup. It's pretty simple. I think that the birds definitely need to be able to pop their wings. They need to be able to stand in their own pen. They love to do that. I mean, they are show off kind of birds. And when I have put them in smaller pens or drop pens that are lower, they don't do that. They don't flap. They don't pop their wings. They don't utilize their muscles like they should. So I like to keep the platform off the ground so they're constantly using their legs to get up and down. I don't think everyone does this, but in my experience, it's pretty important that they use all of this muscular body that God gave them. Like if you're just going to keep them penned in something small because you like to look at them, it's really not fair to the bird.
So
That's just
before
my
you
thought.
move on, what's the height of that pen, Rip? You would know. What's the inside height of those large pens? Just so people get this is the cockerel and he's
Around
at the
30,
top of the
32
pen.
inches.
He's not at the top. So if you look at this picture on the right, I have 4-inch blocks under this pen, and then he's at the
Okay.
top. So these pens do not fit the birds. And if you want to exhibit the birds, they have to be able to stand appropriately and pose, or else what's the point? So I
So
bring these blocks with me.
yeah.
And that in itself because the cage isn't quite as stable. I take zip ties and make sure it's attached to the cage next to it so he doesn't accidentally shove it off the table. They need turkey cages, truly.
They really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah,
Well, even then, is it tall enough, right?
not
Just
really.
because of how they stand, they actually stand taller than most turkeys.
Yeah,
A turkey doesn't
Mhm.
always have its head erect, like in standing in this position. So,
These birds
so you're
have a.
talking, yeah,
Go ahead, Jeff.
30.
Sorry.
You need like 36 inches is what
I,
Rip's
I
saying.
would
It's a
think so.
32-inch pen. You put a 4-inch block in there, and his head is still just about touching. And this is the
right.
cockerel, right?
And this is the
So,
cockerel. And if you don't spend any time with the bird in a smaller cage like this, you're going to put them in something small and they're going to crouch constantly because they're
Yeah.
not used to having their comb
Yeah.
almost rubbing the top. So that's an important part too. Getting them in and out of this door is almost a joke. I look both ways and make sure no one's watching. Like this is going to be a scene. Every time it's a scene. You just
I can
can't,
only imagine.
yeah,
But
you can't
these birds,
practice that enough.
these birds have such a unique, tall, upright stance. If you're not careful, you can really cause that crouch, and it just throws off the whole body type to me.
Oh yeah, the whole vibe is they really have to be proud. That's who they are.
how tall is your 4-year-old male?
33 inches.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
He's huge.
Okay.
He's really
Yeah.
huge.
You think about a yardstick, and he's basically a yardstick tall. So
He's basically a yardstick tall. And this is him on the right here at 5 months old.
Wow.
This is that same bird. And then this is just a contrast. These are two different birds. I preferred the bird on the left greatly for a multitude of reasons. And he was aggressive towards people, which we call being a man fighter. And it was not a joke. It was, you open the door to his pen and he was on you. Or if you thought, well, I have my little rake and he'll stay back, as soon as you would turn your back, he would be on you. And I think that it's important that people recognize that if you're interested in getting into the breed, it's not a breed that you can be careless with children around. They're very big, they're very powerful. And as a young cockerel is coming into sexual maturity, like, it doesn't matter how sweet they were as chicks, they're still a big, capable bird. So you have to, plan for that.
Well, realizing that the genetics were actually honed in on, so 100 generations ago or whatever, these birds were bred for fighting, right?
Mhm.
So they're going to have an aggression level, and that's part of the breed. So don't get these assuming that they're docile and you're going to hold them. And you can, but they're
Yes.
still a
People talk
game bird.
about this photo on the left. People talk about, oh, he looks like he's smiling. Oh, he's your best friend. This bird gave me a black eye one day, and it was not a joke. And I made a choice, watching that his behavior was not right. He was not in his pen at dusk, and he was acting strange. I have no idea. Maybe a hawk flew. I have no idea what happened. But I chose to go in there with him acting that way. And instead of just moving him into his pen, I chose to pick him up. And he is at eye height. And he reacted. So, and he's a nice bird. He's never done anything aggressive. But it is just the fact that you're dealing with a very large animal who is, dialed in to be precise when they strike or do anything like that. It's not like, I don't even know. I feel like most roosters are a little intimidating when they want to attack, but we're not talking a bantam rooster here.
This goes to a new level, right? It's
Yeah.
and there's less fat, and they're way more muscular, right?
Yeah.
I mean, their muscles were their body conformation again was selected and bred for a purpose, right?
For a very long time. Yeah.
They're just very muscular, very
It's what
athletic
makes them
birds.
really cool. And so now I take extra precautions I pay attention to his behavior. I don't ignore his behavior, and I don't hold him at eye level, because it's just an accident waiting to happen. So these are two chicks. Again, because they're so slow to mature, and our shows up here don't start until September, I have to hatch really early. So I have birds in the house, which is another thing that we're hoping, if we get this micro grant, or if we don't, we have a long-term plan to build out a room for hatching. Mandolin Royal?
Mm-hmm.
She talks about her hatching room, and I'm just very envious of her.
Yeah, it's nice. And I want to point out something here about these chicks. And I don't know, there's probably some viewers that have not had any experience with a wheaten color pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And it can really throw you off when they hatch, because the chicks are yellow, solid yellow.
Mm-hmm.
No marks, no stripes, no nothing, just a yellow chick. But you can sex them as soon as they start feathering out, because the male on the right is going to have darker feathers than the pullet on the left.
Yes, always very impatient for especially the shoulders to start pushing out, because at the very beginning, it's real tricky to tell. And you're like, oh, is it this, is it that? But as soon as those shoulders start pushing through, and then for sure. I do see some white chicks, and so that would be silver wheaten, and some yellow chicks. And this next year, I want to get better at my just documenting what that becomes, because as they go through getting their adult feathers, sometimes they'll stay with a black neck for a real long time. All those different things. Yeah.
Silver wheaten is a pretty color pattern to me.
Yes. I think those are the ones that really pop early on. The color's great. So
this is an eye opener here. Let me tell you, folks.
This is a 3-week difference. So this is because I set my eggs. I only have a small incubator right now. And so I set my eggs at 21 days, and then I set another batch of eggs. And then, so this is just 3 weeks. This is how fast these birds grow. It's really fascinating. And that they stand like this from the start. From the start, they have this little attitude, and they run right up to you in the brooder. Boom. I mean, they want to know, why are you here? My cat will sit and with her little paw, and they'll go right at her little paw, like no fear of the murder mittens. Yes. Katie and I talk a lot about is it a boy? Is it a girl? Hour by hour. What do you think now?
Y'all are bad.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what we got here.
Oh, this was just another example showing the females versus the males. It's very cool. I love working with Wheaton for this reason.
And it's such a pretty color when it's right too.
It is. And they all get along in the brooder for a pretty, I don't really know what's normal because this is my breed. And you don't get a long time. You get a good time in the brooder because they're just so personable and they want to be interacting all the time. But after about 8 weeks, that 2-month mark, then you just don't know. There will inevitably be a troublemaker. This picture on the right, and it could be a male, it could be a female who's starting the trouble. You don't know. Sometimes the females will start it and then leave and just leave the boys to duke it out. So so you do have to be really observant of behavior with this breed and decide where are you drawing the line? My line is, I don't want a bloody brooder. I want to enjoy the experience of raising chicks that I'm not constantly having to check or not know what I'm going to walk into. So if I have a chick that's fighting that early, I don't even want to wait and see if they end up being the most perfect chick I hatch this year, because I don't want that in my line. They have to be enjoyable to raise.
Yes.
It's too stressful.
Well, should we think about, have you played with any other types of enrichment? So something else they can peck at or beat up on.
I have. And I had good luck with that with the seals, and the Shamos seem to ignore any type of like parakeet toy or side toy. They're so into each other. So I think that's an area I haven't exhausted yet, but they don't seem as easily distracted.
I'm actually just even wondering something as simple as like, some baled alfalfa hay.
Not tried that.
They can tear apart and eat, right? The only issue with the parakeet toys is they tend to be hard, and they can't really damage them. It's kind of futile. Whereas if you put in a cake of alfalfa hay and just let them tear it to shreds, right? So they can take out their aggression on something and watch it disappear.
That's a great idea.
Just an idea. So
yeah, that's definitely something to try.
Just something they can beat up on, and they're not hurting anybody.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That gets us through the slides, so now we can get down to some of the nitty gritty what ifs and why fors.
Yeah.
But you talked about it a little bit, and obviously with a bird of this size, there's got to be some pretty unique management considerations. I mean, from the time they're hatched until they're mature. But what about hatching? You find them easier, harder, or about the same to hatch as other breeds?
I don't think they're any more difficult to hatch than other breeds. And having hatched something like Saramas, which are just like mind-boggling and frustrating to a lot of people, it's pretty standard procedure. I dry hatched my Shamos. I had great fertility, and I mean, I had great luck with these birds with hatching so far. So that's positive. But I mean, then the brooder does pose some challenges. Especially, it depends on what size you want to have, like size flock of Shamos you want to have, because you can't combine age groups. And maybe you can, but you're taking a big
Yeah.
risk.
Yeah.
So having a plan before you just go, these are really cool birds, I'll plan it out as I go. That's just
Mm-mm.
not a good idea. Doesn't work well.
And I saw you had that group of chicks were in a livestock watering tub trough.
Oh yeah, yep.
Do you brood them like that from day one on up, or?
No, I actually, I have a larger, I ran into this problem this year. I have a larger brooder, and I had really high hopes that I was going to be able to integrate age groups, and it just didn't happen. But I had a backup plan, which was the one that was in the picture. But then I quickly had to make sure I had a grow out pen, because I hatched for most people, hatching 22 birds is not going to be a very big number. But when it comes to Shamos that you might have to separate every single one by, a couple months. I mean, you hope not, but that's a worst case scenario. Always plan
Yeah.
for the worst case. Then room becomes slim pickings pretty quick.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you could run out of space real quick.
Yes, and some people have success keeping a bachelor flock of grow outs, but then, I mean, inevitably I see, there's death, and I just like prefer to avoid that altogether if
Well,
possible.
sure.
So,
And
Jessica, one of the tricks that other game breeds, game type fowl breeders are using is when they do the free range, is they put a mature cock in there with them,
yes,
and no one challenges, right? He keeps everybody else under control. So there's something about he knows he's the dominant, and he doesn't. There's nobody really in there for him to challenge that's worthy, and
hmm
yet all the young cockerels are not dumb enough to start a fight because he runs over and breaks it up, right? That
hmm
sort of thing. So I don't know if you've tried that yet. I know
with the
that's an
free range
old.
birds,
Okay.
because I have my American game are my range flock, and yes, our our flock leader, his name is Hook, and he puts the kibosh. So I have 4 grow out stags that are free range right now, and then I have 3 grow out stags that are penned separately. And I am just so happy with the progress of the free range birds compared to the penned birds. I'd like to be able to replicate more of a free range environment with a little bit more control. Because I can't feed these birds how they need to be fed when they're free ranging. They're fed like everybody else with the flock is fed. And then so that poses the problem, having the older bird with younger birds and feeding them appropriately. Oh, there's always problems.
Always.
What about getting these birds ready for a show? And
Oh, man.
I would imagine there's some special considerations going on there.
What a scene that is. My dear husband, as I'm bringing him into the bathtub, because it's too cold around here in November to give these half naked birds a bath outside. So, yeah, my bathroom is a scene of ancient combat chickens and towels, and it's really something. Fortunately, they seem to be humbled by being wet, and they don't really fight it. Um, but I think the hardest part is transporting them, and it's just a big bird. They got just keeping all of these parts clean. But then I look at these people traveling with white birds and think I probably have it easy.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah,
That's the reason I don't have white birds.
that doesn't
Easier
look
for
fun
sure.
at all.
Yeah.
But the stags, they get disturbed. They do get very disturbed when they don't have a pullet with them. I tried to do some cage training differently this year, and I tried for weeks, and it was just unsuccessful. This bird was just getting worse and worse. And then as soon as I gave him a pullet, he just is totally subdued now and has no problem being confined. So far, when I've traveled with my birds to shows, every stag travels in a large dog crate with 1 pullet, and they stay very calm on the ride. Anytime I've tried to box one alone, they get a little bit frantic. And frantic for 7 hours before you get cooped is not really okay.
Mm-mm. A question here. This strikes me as a breed that would benefit from being posed right at a show.
Oh, yeah.
Do you work with training your birds to pose?
Oh, yeah, I work with treats. Yeah, you've talked about that before. So they're all, anytime they see me walk up to the thing, their heads are up there. One has learned to stick his head out of the drop pen. He has to turn it sideways, but now he sees me coming and he's ready. So
That's
they have
funny.
such personality and character.
Sounds like they're pretty easy to pose train, though.
Oh, yeah. There's not a fearful bone in their body, which is good and bad sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sue asked about them flying well. And as far as flying goes, like I said, I keep my the platforms that they roost on up. They're about 30 inches, and they hop up to those with no effort. Usually it's all legs, but they will not go over a fence. Not yet. They would have to be really spooked and probably young and lightweight at that point. They won't go over a regular
Interesting.
fence. Thank God.
Yeah. We got a question back up here, and we're getting to that part of the show.
Yeah. Well, and Barbara asked, so you do single residence per bird, but you just said that you're doing like a pullet with a cockerel or a hen with a rooster,
Yeah,
with a cock, just to keep them calm, just so they're
yes,
not alone.
I have
kind of
not
thing.
had luck. That was my intention, and I think Katie has done it successfully. And maybe it's just who I am, that I am not tolerant of a pacing bird that is not able to look at peace in the day. It bothers me. If all they can do is take a second to rapidly eat and then pace a fence, it just doesn't seem like the right way for them to live.
And I
So
think
yeah,
too, their gameness. So if they see another bird in another pen nearby, they're going to pace, whether it's a hen who's walking around outside or whether it's a rooster 3 doors down. Yeah. And pretty much all the game breeds, I've watched, and that's just their behavior. And they don't really calm down. They're just high strung.
So on this note, Rip, I have a question for you. As a judge, I've done this. I don't know if I was supposed to do this, but I did it anyway. So if you walk up and your coop cards are in such a way, but you're all in a row because I have one breed, can I decide where my birds go in that row? Or do they have to stay the way the cards are laid out?
Well, they're laid out by, of course, breed, and then variety, and then sex. You'll have all the cock birds here, maybe 3 or 4, and then maybe 2 or 3 hens, and then maybe 3 or 4 cockerels and 5 pullets.
Okay.
They can go anywhere they want to in that, or anywhere
In
you
that
want to put them.
small range.
And yeah, you can't put like a hen in the middle of a cockbird group.
Okay. I mean, that's something to think about for planning for future shows, because to keep one of these birds calm, and again, they can uproot this coop from the table very easily. I put them by whoever their pen mate is, and then they're okay with that. But if I choose to bring more birds, that's going to add more complications to my methods.
Yeah.
I want to see them uproot the pen and be loose on the floor. I want to see that.
Gosh.
So, yeah.
I mean,
So
they
if they
can only
break
be
loose
outdone
next
by
year,
a guinea loose on the floor, right? That's my favorite. Guinea on the loose. You just wave goodbye. Goodbye.
Adios.
And so Susan asked about your nutritional part of it. And I don't have your feeds memorized, Jessica. So do you want to talk about, the program that we've put together for bringing them up through?
Well, I don't have everything memorized either, but I did fortunately write down a couple of key notes, which was number one, that they need an animal protein. And you had suggested a fish meal or wild caught crab meal, something that mimics what their protein source would have been, um, you know, in the wild, I guess. And they're large birds. So vegetarian diet, probably not going to be successful. We had gone over a couple of myths. A lot of people supplement with cat food or think that you need a higher calcium because they have a faster bone growth. Or some people think that you need to keep an extremely low protein for chick so they grow slower and they don't grow too fast. None of these things I've learned have any scientific basis whatsoever. So we had a 23% starter for protein and a 21% grower with lysine at 1.25%, I think, and methionine at 0.5% or above.
Yeah, should have been like 0.52, 0.53, I think.
I think it was 0.55% is what you had my particular grower at. So
do you remember what the calcium level was?
I don't.
I think I did want your calcium at, so like any other random chick like you would buy at Tractor Supply, I would be happy with 0.85 calcium. But because of accelerated growth, particularly, like the Shamo and other birds that grow very quickly and they have that growth spurt, normally I'll try and be at 1.2, 1.3 calcium just to keep up with that growth, right? So that was one of the considerations that, I'm sure I would have factored in. So now I'm curious. I'll look at that in the morning when I get to the office. But you haven't had any issues.
No. Well, so here's something that has come up. Maybe it's a myth, maybe it's not. But people have recommended giving your birds glucosamine if they're not as active as they seem like they should be. I have one stag now who is just exceptionally large for his age, and then that was recommended because he lays down a lot. He moves around the yard all the time, but if he's going to, graze or do whatever he's doing it on the ground. And he's been like this for a couple of months now. And
how old is he?
He was hatched, I think March 10th, something like that.
I have seen similar things with my reds. A lot of times they'll hit a certain point in their development, and when they eat, they're plop down on the ground and just hogging the feed trough. I refer to them as my little red feeder pigs at that stage.
Well, yes, for me, it just looks like he's lazy because his health seems perfectly fine in every way, and he will happily run if he sees me with the feed bin.
Okay. So you're not okay. No discoloration, no swelling of the hock.
No.
Right. That's
nope.
Okay. And when he sits on a normal sitting posture, not like all
he's
the
not
way
just
back
resting.
on his butt. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's not
goes
sitting
all the way
back. Okay. No, what I mean is,
he's not just on his shanks.
Yeah, but if he's on his butt and his feet are actually coming forward out the front of his
not
body.
like that at all.
Okay. I'm just worried about viral arthritis. So that's where we want to be careful of them eating anything off the ground because they can pick that up, and it's a bacteria that'll lodge in the hock joint, and it slowly deteriorates the metatarsal tendon. So that's why I asked.
How do they pick that up?
So it's actually, the bacteria is in the soil. So, when people tell me they're feeding on the ground, I just cringe, right? And I want to cry. And so it's like, don't do this, people, right? It's like, but people do it anyway. So yeah, spilled feed, eating off the ground, especially if there's a higher moisture content, the bacteria is already living there, right? And they just pick up a little bit of dirt that has the bacteria in it when they're trying to get that lost piece of grain that fell on the ground. And it doesn't take much exposure to it. Once it gets in the system, it just starts growing, but the body pushes it off, and I can send you a link to it, but it loads up in the hock joint where it goes from feather to scales, right there in that knee
Wow.
joint, so to speak.
Hmm.
And eventually it makes them immobile. Um, then the only other attribute, but you're saying this is only one, so watch.
Mhm.
Does he high step? When you see a bird that really exaggeratedly takes a step, like leg comes way up high, straightens it out, comes down, kind of like a soldier marching, okay, is the best way to say it. And that would be more of a sign of gout. Okay. So,
Nope. And I know what you're talking about. He paddles. I mean, he does look very strange when he runs. He
okay.
paddles like this when he runs, but he might
Okay.
just be very gangly and awkward.
Okay.
But I might
Yeah.
also be undereducated.
I'm just checking,
And
but I
Jamestown
would, if
people
you get
seem
a
to like
chance,
to feed their birds on the ground.
yeah, don't do that.
I won't.
Yeah, I know it drives me crazy, but when you get a chance to hold him, you don't have to pick him up, but just kind of gently feel or massage the hock joint just to see if it feels more watery or gelatin like than other birds, right? And see
Okay.
if it may be slightly larger. You can also check to see if it feels feverish or hot. That would be another sign. Just
Is
sorry, I didn't mean to
glucosamine
get.
safe for birds?
It is, glucosamine's safe for everything, and people are thinking that it's going to help the joint, but in your diets, because we've addressed the appropriate level of fats, I'm not worried about it. And all the components are there for good cartilage, good joint lubrication. So if somebody was feeding a deficient feed, they would see a response from the glucosamine. But
Mm-hmm.
Jessica Sue
Uh,
had a comment about your question about shows and how the birds are placed.
mhm.
She said it might be worthwhile to check with the show staff and see if they would make a concession on placement.
I
As of,
agree.
uh, you know, as a former show secretary, I would probably be amenable to that. I just had to make sure, and you might have to do it as a follow up to let the judge know what's going on and why it was done that way.
It would be interesting to see how it was received because change is not always received well, but it's worth trying.
If you don't know, you don't ever change anything if you don't ask.
This is true. It's not. I'm not asking for a turkey cage. Just asking to put them a little different. Turkey cage would be nice though.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Laura Elwood wants to know: do you have any secrets to share about bathing your birds?
Oh gosh. No, I'm fascinated to read other people's secrets to bathing their birds. Again, I have a hard feathered breed, so it's pretty straightforward. I don't have to worry about blowing out down and getting things to lay right, and it's going to lay the way it lays. I just got to make sure they're fed properly so they shine, and that they're housed properly so they're not all broken and frayed. And then, I use just a nice, high quality, natural soap, shampoo, conditioner for dogs, and it works for me.
Matt Lamont wrote an article. I don't know if I have it or not, but it was a good article on showing and conditioning hard feathered breeds.
Mm.
If I can find
Well,
it, I'll send it to you.
yeah, please do. It's a unique, it poses its own unique problems.
Okay, let's. We don't have. I think that gets all of our
They're actually,
questions.
they're quite enjoyable to prepare for a show because as long as you get them, if they're conditioned properly from the beginning, they're just going to wow people anyway. Like
Oh
you really
yeah.
can't mess it up at the bathing part.
I mean, how could you not look at one of those shamos and not go, "Wow, that's
Right.
a bird"?
Yes. And
yeah,
I
They
more
did.
so learn along the way, that taking them from home and then the change in environment at the show and how other birds might be stressing them out or how they behave there, that's where all of the problems happen and make them look different. Is, are they confident? Will they stand up? Are they going to wreck their comb on the cage bars? It all happens in the final hour.
Another question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say old Rip's decided he wants Shamos,
Mm.
and old Rip doesn't know doodly squat about Shamos other than what he's read in the standard.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some good resources people could refer to out there? Maybe some
Hmm.
books,
Oh yeah.
websites,
I
social
actually,
media groups.
this is a book that anybody even interested, whether you think you're going to get them or not, it's just a really cool book to learn about a totally different side of breeds.
What's the title
Um,
of that? It's
it's
got,
called Oriental Game Fowl, and it's Horse Schmud.
oh, yeah.
Yep, it's an excellent book. It's not very easy book to find. It's not a very cheap book, but it's got a lot of great. Wow, this is just not as easy as it seems like it should be. Got a lot of great photos in it. You'll see there's different sized shamos that aren't in our standard, but they are in the Japanese standard. There's small, medium, and large shamos, but it dives into more of the details, the coloring, all of this type of stuff, and the history of Japanese poultry. It's a great book. I loved this one. There's also this is the official Shamo lady, Julia Keeling. She she's passionate about the bird, and she did a lot of research on the bird. This book was disappointing in regards to giving me information that would help me on my journey. However, it documents some really cool art and history about the Shamo. If you want to nerd out in that way, this is a cool book, but it's not a lot about husbandry or anything like that. So, and it's also really expensive. So if you're dividing your money, go with the Oriental Game Fowl book. And then Livestock Conservancy, you know, they asked me to participate in a DNA study on inherently aggressive birds. So I drew some blood from my birds and sent it in for that, something interesting. And I'm going to help out with the census. Oriental game community is like, it's hard to break into. There's a little bit of like secrecy and things for some reason.
Is there a website for that? I know
Yep.
you have a game fowl website, but
Yep. I started that, the gamefowlconservation.org website, just because I wanted to compile information. Facebook's not accessible to everyone. There's a million groups out there. You can't track them all. So I did that, and I started a Facebook group under the same name, Game Fowl Conservation Network. And if you look up Oriental Game Fowl in groups on Facebook, you'll find a lot of groups. A lot of it is just people showing off their birds. It's not a lot of learning. It's just not. It's just not there's not a Poultry Keepers 360 for game fowl.
you ought to work on that now.
Yeah, really. I saw somebody post today in the group that they had found like the Holy Grail or whatever they said.
Yeah, I saw that.
It is like that, though. You're like, oh my gosh, it's a group that actually, is not judgmental, relies on factual information. And, people have goals and purpose. And that's really, you want a community that has similar goals and purpose.
Absolutely. And folks, her website and Facebook group are both excellent.
Thank you.
If you have any interest at all whatsoever, you need to go check them both out.
It's really good. I just highly recommend anybody interested in the breed, just talk to as many people as you can. Everyone's going to have different experiences with the breed. They keep them a little bit differently. So don't just go based off of what one person said. Try and talk to as many people as you can before you dive in.
Shaggy wants to know if you do table training with your Shamos.
Once again, I'm picturing them on a table with me right now. I do not, just because of how they are. Everything I do, grooming, all of this stuff I do on the ground because I want to be able to stand up and be farther away from their face.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add about Shamos tonight?
As soon as we get off of this video, I will have half a dozen things.
I thought I was the only one that did that. Now, come on, Jessica.
Well, I asked you pre-show, so if somebody listening or watches the show later, and let's say they reach out to you and they want a pair or a trio, what should they expect to pay for a good quality, good breeding pair of Shamos?
It's not an inexpensive bird, and you do have to be extremely cautious because there's a lot of mixed birds out there, and you'll be forever trying to get your bird close to something you could go and exhibit with. So I would say not to, if you can help it, going to shows, going somewhere like the National where there might be enough of a pool of people you can see them in person. That would be definitely preferred, and you could expect to pay upwards of $350 for a pair for sure. And you're also competing with a couple different markets of people that might want these birds. So you're not only, it's not only ornamental show keepers. There's a lot of different types of folks that keep game also.
Sure.
So a trio would probably be in the $500 range. I'm assuming, if you got a pair for $350, probably a trio in the $500 to $600 range.
Yeah, which does seem extreme. But yeah, if you want to start with really nice birds, I don't think that is extreme.
Well, you're saying that a lot of folks would have an apoplectic seizure over that price. But when you stop and think about it, the rarity of the breed, the quality of your birds, and just all the management and difficulties that goes into trying to raise those things, I wouldn't want to think that I could go out and get 24 hatching eggs and raise birds for that amount. You'd have a fortune tied up in those birds.
Yeah. Yep, this is true. And there's a lot of, you got to really study the standard and know what are common Shamo defects, which is going to be a large comb. This is in both of these books as well. Oversized comb, duck feet, slouching wings. You got to know what you're looking for. And if you don't see a magnificent bird, then don't pay for a magnificent bird.
Right.
If you just want a pet, then pay pet price.
That's a good quote. I may have to use that.
Yeah.
What Susan wants to know, what's her average lay rate?
So this is something I'm going to do next year. I'm going to commit to my different pens, my young up and coming layers, and then my older birds, and come up with this, because I don't think that the information out there is correct. I think right now it's like they say that Shamos lay 90 eggs a year. They're some of my best layers. I always have eggs on a nearly daily basis from my trio pens, 2 eggs. And I think that's fascinating because most people say they're horrible layers, but I do not have a number. I've not done that.
I would have thought it would have been closer to that 90 egg range, but I think that's spectacular that you're able to do that.
But we'll see what winter brings this year. So,
well, when did they start laying? They should have started in April, May, like everybody else, right? With the longer days. So, you're already, May, June, July, you're already 6 months in, right? So that's 100.
And everybody's molted already. All the Shamo pens have molted.
And you're still getting eggs, even though they're molted?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Persistent little things, aren't they?
They are. And double yolkers all the time. So it's Jeff's fault. It's the feed. They're magical Shamos.
Well, we don't want double yolkers. So maybe we're overfeeding the adults.
Overfeeding.
Yeah. I wonder if we may have to cut back. I don't know how much you're giving them, but we probably should have that discussion as well.
All right.
On the feed formulas that I've made for you, like the adult breeders, and again, I don't know, but you probably can do with about 3 or 4 ounces per bird. Don't overfeed them. So,
but they're hungry.
That would explain your double yolkers, even though their size. Okay, but that would, if they're, once they're mature, if they're getting, too much protein, you're going to end up with that. That would explain it. So, I'm happy for you, and they're great table eggs, and I'm sure they taste. I bet they taste really good, but for hatching purposes, you don't really want those double yolkers. So,
no. Gosh.
Well, something something to
Yep.
pursue. Every
There
time I
you
listen
go.
to a podcast, every time I learn something new, and I think, wow, gosh, there's more. I need another spreadsheet. I need another spreadsheet.
Yeah.
We'll
It's like,
hone it in though.
Bless your heart.
yeah.
Well, Jessica, I really appreciate you agreeing to come spend an hour with us tonight.
This is great.
It was not only a fun show; it was a very educational show,
It was
and
great.
I just loved it. So
Well,
we'll
thank
have
you.
to do
Thanks for
this again
having me.
sometime after you
Yeah.
get your grant and all that, and we can learn more
Oh,
stuff.
fingers crossed. I'll
Well,
start
good
the
luck with that.
spreadsheets, and then I'll have more details to share.
Sounds
Well,
good.
folks, thank you for joining us this evening. Be sure and join us in 2 weeks. Our very own Sue Dobson is going to be with us, and
Cool.
she's going to bring her. I don't know whether it's breeding partner or partner in crime. Uh, they work together on crevecoeurs, and
Oh,
she's going to
cool.
be talking about those big black beautiful crested fowl. So that's in 2 weeks. So until next time, thank you for listening. You folks have a great day, and we will talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye bye.
Bye.